Hello and welcome to the Admin Bar, the community and podcast connecting the people with the products, the lessons, and the strategies to help push their business forward. My name is Kyle Van Duzen, and with me is my good buddy and co-host Matt Siebert. How you doing today, Matt?
I'm doing well. This is great. Starting off again. New year, new podcast.
Right, absolutely. Let's hope so. Anyways, now we just got to keep it up. So, all right. Well, today we're going to be discussing the importance of formal education in the web industry, or if it's really even important at all. But before we get into that, I do want to take care of a few little housekeeping items. I want to invite you to stop by our website at theadminbar.com, where you can find notes for this episode, all of our past episodes, tons of articles on our products, and a private job board, and links to subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the Friday Chaser. And if you're not a member of our community, which was recently voted the #1 WordPress community and is nearing about 5,000 members right now, well, we'd definitely love to have you. So you can go to theadminbar.com/group, answer a couple little questions, and we'll let you right in. And lastly, I want to say a huge thank you to today's sponsor, the Content Lab. The Content Lab provides reliable, white label content writing services for digital agencies and their clients. Whether it's content strategy, website copy, lead magnets, blogs, or even email marketing and newsletters, the Content Lab has you covered. Now, I've been working personally with Abby and her team for well over a year now, and what I like best is the complete peace of mind I have when I send a project her way. I know I won't be waiting ages for clients to send copy, and I know the copy my clients get will be perfectly formatted for the web, optimized for search engines, and conversion focused. Now, if you're struggling with copy, then I would suggest you head on over to thecontentlab.ie. Yes, they are Irish, and let Abby know we sent you. I think you'll be as surprised as I was at just how affordable it is, and I know you'll be blown away with their work. All right, so let's dig into this today, Matt. I think we got a lot of room to cover. I will start this off by saying this morning I posted a post inside the group asking people in the community how many of them went to college, if they went for something related or unrelated. And I have the results of this poll here. I'm going to read from my list. I just did it right before I did all the calculations right before we jumped on.
Nice.
I was really surprised to hear this because this is not what I would have guessed at all. So about 48% of the people went to college and got a degree in something related to the web industry in general, or running their agency. I think business and things like that are definitely related. 35% went and got a degree in something completely unrelated. 12% did not go, and 5% started college but did not finish. And that is definitely not the guess I would have made.
No, I'm actually kind of shocked that it's not the other way around, to be honest. And I mean, I definitely have a personal bias there, but I still, like, holy cow, those numbers are way off from what I would have thought.
Yeah, and I mean, saying the personal bias, I think, is important. I think that's an important place for us to start. So we're going to have this conversation that's kind of the pros and cons of going to college for our industry, especially if you're going to be running an agency. There's probably a distinction there. If you're going to run an agency, if you're going to go try to get a job, then your outlook's a little bit different. But I think we both have some biases here. So one is going to be, we're both in the United States where higher education is extremely expensive. I'm sure if you want to go get a 4-year degree, I didn't look this up, but I'm sure it costs you 80 grand just to go do that, right? So there's a huge financial burden if you want to do that. And then also we have kind of the routes each one of us took. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about where you voted in that poll?
So I did a little bit. I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do or where I wanted to go. My entire high school career was built around learning film and cinematography and all that, and that was where I was going to go. And then I did a little bit of that and realized that's not, like, as much as I loved it, it's not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So I was a little bit, lost. So I figured I'd get my, just the general stuff out of the way. And so I did that, and I never went back. So I have a tiny bit, but that's it. I know you have an associate's, yes?
Yeah, but I didn't go back to school until I was around 30 or so. I don't think I finished my degree until I was into my 30s. And it's a 2-year degree from a community college that took me like 5 years to finish.
Yeah, I think you were like wrapping it up when we first started talking with each other.
Yeah. And so for me, I went and got an associate's in business. I just figured, at that point, I wasn't even doing web full time or anything. I just thought I was a graphic designer then, but I just thought a business degree would be more applicable to whatever I wanted to do in the future than necessarily like a graphic design degree where I'd already spent, 15 years doing graphic design. Not that I didn't have plenty of stuff to learn, I still do, but I just thought the business side of it would be more applicable to me. Looking back now, I think that was the right decision because starting your own business, I think there was a lot of things I took away from that experience that definitely helped. So that gives you kind of an idea of where both of us are at in this. So let's dive in. Let's talk about some of the pros and cons. I think we're probably going to end up with more cons on this list than pros, but let's see what we can do. So I want to start off with one of my huge pros to going to college is I think it raises the floor. So it might not make your ceiling higher as far as what you could potentially do because you went to school, but I think it raises your floor of where you start at. So, for me going and getting a business degree, I had already had to do finance classes and public speaking classes and just all kinds of like basics like that gave me a better foundation than I think people who would just jump into starting their business and have no idea about any of those things. Like I had already spent a semester like heads down inside of QuickBooks, having to balance a company's books and stuff like that. So I feel like having that floor raised a little bit is a huge part of how this is beneficial to me running my agency.
And in some ways, I have a similar. I mean, it's not schooling as far as like university or colleges or anything, but I've always been into art, and I took private art classes throughout my entire childhood and like young adult life. So like I did years of pastels and oils and all like more fine art things, but that still gave me that ground, that base of just as far as design goes, like color theory and layouts and how to draw the eye from one place to another and things like that. So, I mean, I think regardless, like having a little bit of something to start with, I don't know where I read it. It's probably been, echoed 100 different ways, but you need to know the rules in order to break them type of thing, especially with like
Sure.
art and design and all of that. So yeah, I think that just having like some sort of a basis somewhere, that it helps.
Yeah. And I mean, especially on the design side of it, like some people do just have an eye for design. Like they quickly pick those things up. They can make anything look pretty decent pretty quickly. But what's really useful, and I don't have a formal education in design. It was, like you, I just started doing it in high school for fun and then ended up getting a job doing that. So I spent a lot of times just practicing it. But the schooling side of it, the formal education side of it gives you such a heads up and like, head start on all the vocabulary you need to use to be able to explain things. Or when you need to debug something, you can look at it and say, okay, well, because the rules around white space and contrast and all these things, because you learned them in school, you can quickly make things look better because you have like the vocabulary and these definitions to lean on, that foundation to kind of go back to, instead of just moving pixels around a screen until something magically clicks, and it looks good, which I do still all the time.
Yeah, I mean, you got to play a little bit, but knowing like where to start playing helps.
Yeah, absolutely. And so another one that was brought up several times inside the post I did inside the group this morning was just like the college experience. I think for, not only for like, I guess, opening you up to more different diverse things, which is definitely really important when you're owning a business and you're dealing with customers from all walks of life and all that. If you had never gone and had any of that college experience, maybe that's a little bit more difficult. But that, and like the networking aspect of it too, like how many people go back and make connections with people they hung out with or knew or went to classes with and stuff in college. So I think that's a huge part of it too. I know that's something my wife talks about, is like just all the experience of going to college was so valuable, sometimes even more so than the actual knowledge you got from it.
And like, I mean, it's a gamble too. One of the things that I wanted to bring up was while I was working on set, the Steadicam operator had to take like a couple of weeks off, and so the guy that was leading the camera crew, he was the one that actually like allowed me to tag along and gave me the position that I had there. He was going through resumes to try to find somebody to take over for these 2 weeks, and he was making two piles, and one pile would fill up and it would immediately go in the trash. And it was very quick. He was making super quick judgments. And so I asked him, like, why do you immediately know that these folks you don't want to hire? And I'm not going to say what school they went to, but it was a design school that was for profit in Florida. And I'm sure a lot of people know which one that is. And that alone, like, I mean, if you can pay that amount of money for schooling and have like literally a hiring manager look at your, like, where you went and immediately discard it, like, that's a chance I wasn't willing to make. Like, that's a lot of money for that to potentially happen. So I figured, I mean, that among other things that had happened, I would just hit YouTube and hit forums. I remember like Minties way back in the day. It was a t-shirt design website. Those guys were brutal. They were amazing artists. They were absolutely incredible, but they were brutal to other people's work. Not like in a mean way, but just in a, this isn't good and this is why, cut and dry. And that's where I submitted a lot of my first designs, and they were torn apart. And I think like having that community, to go back to that, the college analogy, like to have those people that are willing to tell you that this doesn't look good, this is why, you're going to learn a lot more, a lot quicker. So if you don't go to college, like find a community to join where people will honestly tell you what's what, because your mom's probably not going to.
Yeah. I think not only tell you what's not good, but explain why. That's the huge part of it, so you can make those improvements constantly. So, so I think there's definitely plenty of pros here. And I don't want to say like in this conversation, I don't think either one of us would be talking anybody in or out of going to school. I think everybody's path's different, and whatever works for you. Probably experience and college is the best of both worlds, and you probably get further along, but obviously you can be successful either way.
That actually goes into to one of the comments that we got on that post that you made, where I forget who it was, but somebody had mentioned that while you are in school, if that's the course you want to take, that don't just do coursework, like do other things as well, and put those out into the world, not just what you're supposed to be doing there, because you're going to get a lot further a lot quicker.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's look at some of the cons. I know one you brought up in our notes before we started this is just, especially in our industry, how quickly technology changes, and that colleges can't seem to keep up with those things.
Yeah, and this is actually the so working and watching all of those resumes get thrown in the trash. That was like probably the biggest impact on me. But the second biggest was I had made a couple of friends from this Minties website. And one of them, also named Matt, he was in school in Chicago, one of the art and design schools, and I think he was about 2 years in to a 4-year degree and dropped out. He had started, his own business at that point, and one of the things that made him want to do that was that he was becoming successful pretty quickly. But what actually turned the key to that was one day he was sitting in class, and his teacher walked up behind him, was watching him work a bit, and leaned in and said, "How did you do what you just did?" And at that moment, this guy was like, "I'm not paying this amount of money to show my teachers how I'm doing things. Like, I'm learning all of this through YouTube videos and other artists. I'm just going to drop out, and I'm going to continue learning from these people, but push my own stuff, like, first, now, like, why wait another 2 years to do this stuff?" And I'm not saying like drop out of school, don't do that. Everybody's path is different, but that again, like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, why teach your teachers how to do things? Like, it just moves so quickly.
I can see that being pretty annoying, especially with the cost of school. And I guess that's the other huge one too. Like, do you want to take out at least here in the States, I know that's our perspective, so I can't speak to how it is in other countries where they give you education, which would be nice. But I mean, do you want to go into huge amounts of debt in order to get this piece of paper.
Right.
I went to a small community college because of that reason, because I could afford to fund it as I went. I had a job and was paying for it as I went, so I didn't have to go into any debt to do it. But like when me and my wife got together, she was still paying student loans on her school and stuff too. So, you got to think about how are you going to carry that debt into also running a business? Because when you start running a business,
There's more debt.
things can be pretty lean. You don't want extra debt on top of your plate.
Yeah, but like having just said that and totally agree with all of that, you're gonna pay your dues somehow.
That's
Like
true.
even if you don't go to college, you don't have that massive debt, you're still gonna be paying dues. It's either going to take longer to establish your business because you don't exactly know the ins and outs of running a business. Which is why, like, if I were to go back to school, it would be for some sort of a business thing. But the first like 5 years of building what I have now, I didn't go out, I didn't see people, I didn't date that much. Like I lost a lot of like my early 20s fun stuff, and I just see that as I paid my dues in that way rather than massive debts. And my old roommate, every time I complained about this, would be like, dude, you don't have debt, you didn't go to college, like you're paying your dues this way. And like he was right.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't looked at it that way before.
Right.
There was one other. I think I don't know if this is a pro or con. It might be a whole different part of the conversation here, but we can kind of get into the next part of this. But I do I do often feel like our industry needs a better barrier of entry. I think it's great. Like if there was a barrier of entry, I wouldn't have got in, so I would have kicked myself out and pretty much everybody else that I know and love.
Right.
But because anybody can just open up shop and say, "Hey, I'm a web development agency," every one of us has dealt with the clients that got screwed by the last developer and have a bad taste in their mouth about everybody in our industry because there
It's
is
like, and
zero
that's a
barrier of entry.
yeah, sorry, that's a high percentage too. Like that's like 60% of my clients have had a
Yeah.
very bad experience in the past because yeah, you can just throw up a website, say that you do it, and start getting work.
And I feel like for so many industries, the higher education is that barrier of entry. Like you need this degree in order to go do this. Like I can't just show up at, even if it's not a degree, even if it's just certification. Like I can't show up to somebody's house as a plumber because I don't have any license to go do plumbing in people's house. And if obviously for good reason, because you could destroy the city's water supply, if you connect the wrong pipes together. You can't go cut somebody's hair without a license to cut hair. Well, for good reason, because they use all kinds of chemicals that could burn somebody's scalp off, right? Well, we do a lot of things that are pretty important to people's businesses. I've seen a lot of web developers tear up somebody's business financially because of bad decisions, and because there's no barrier of entry to do what we do, that just leaves the door open for so many problems. But yeah,
I
that's
totally
that's
agree.
definitely another one to think about. All right, so let's talk about some of the alternatives to formal education, because I think our industry is further along in that than some other industries are. But obviously, the internet's changed things, and then I think COVID has accelerated things where everybody's more open to doing online courses, YouTube, shit. I learned things on TikTok. Like I learned CSS tricks on TikTok sometimes. And I'm like, holy
Yeah.
crap, that saves me tons of time or money or whatever it may be. So there's so many alternative forms of education online now. I told Dave Foy, like every time I've been through one of his courses, and it's been, I don't know, 3 or 4 now that he's taught, every one of his courses were better and more valuable than any college course I ever took.
Yeah.
He's that level of teacher, but there's been plenty of online courses that I've taken that I remember from. I've gotten more value out of. I've been able to put into practice quicker than anything I ever learned in school.
Yeah, it just hit me too that when you're at school, you're assigned a teacher, and if you don't jive
Yeah.
with that teacher, or if they're like their workflow doesn't work for you, and trust me, the way that Kyle works and the way that I work is vastly different, but we produce similar looking styles. Like we have a similar like design sense, but that doesn't mean we work the same way, like at all. So if
Yeah.
you're stuck with a teacher that you're not like able to learn like the way that you need to learn, that's kind of tough luck, right? Like, I mean, I haven't been to college, but I'm pretty sure you can't just like keep swapping teachers. But with these courses online, you can, you can find the person that talks your language and follow them. And the best part of that is that, yeah, like courses can be expensive, but for what you're getting and like the value there and being able to pick your teacher, it's definitely worth that small gamble rather than the hundreds of thousands of dollars that college might cost.
Yeah, and you say, some of the courses can be expensive. They're really not that expensive. I think if you compared any of the courses that are out there to going to take a college class, you're going to save money doing it online for sure.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, I'm talking from my own experience where like I don't like spending money. Like I like saving it.
You're a Scrooge.
I mean, I like giving gifts too, but that said, like, where was I going with this? Oof, my phone went off and I just completely.
Well, while you rethink about it here, I just Googled it. It says the average cost of a class in the United States for one course is $3,277. I've never paid anything near that for an online course. I think Dave's, I paid a couple $100s and got tons out of it.
Okay, yeah, that's where I was going with that. I recently purchased a course to learn a bit more about blocks and how they all work, and I think it was like 250, $300, and that's still a fair amount of money, like for me, I don't know, like it was a should I do this, should I not? And at the end of it, it was like, well, you want to learn it, this is a good course, like I'm just going to do it, and I'm glad I did, like really glad. It was a great course, but because I've spent so little amount of money, like those smaller amounts for like learning still don't like click for me right away. I think that's changing. Like I'm definitely investing more into to like some sort of a continued learning type of path. But when YouTube and like the admin bar and things like that, where you just post a question and get an answer, yeah, it's more of a difficult topic for me, I guess.
Yeah, so I mean, YouTube's huge. Obviously, uh, I've learned how to do most of my job off YouTube videos, and people can do that in almost any industry, which is pretty amazing. I think the difference between that and buying a course is: do you want to do this in a cohesive manner, or do you want to do this in a fragmented manner, where like you pick up this here and that here and that here, and then it's on you to stitch it all together? Whereas a course, they're going to kind of do all that for you, curate all that content into one piece and walk you step by step through it. So you're kind of paying for that more than you're paying for the information, because the information's out there. Like you can find the information.
And like piece by piece, like it works for, oh, I need to figure out how to do this with CSS, or I need to do like these little like micro things. But when it comes to changing over to blocks, for example, and like wanting to do to learn all of that, like I don't know what I don't know. So a course is going to actually, go from point A to point B. And like I was talking to you about how I was struggling just to start because I didn't know where to start, or like I didn't want to start learning things the wrong way. So
Sure.
when it's a larger thing, buying a course absolutely makes sense.
Yeah. Shout out to Mike Oliver's Generate Blocks
That's the
course.
one.
That's what we're talking about. We'll put a link to that in there in the show notes too. So, all right. So yeah, I think we covered most of that here that I had inside of my notes. I think both you and I land kind of in the same place here. Is like, it's good. Is it always worth it? Maybe not. I think it does change the equation depending on what you want to do, right? Because if you just wanted to go get a job at some big agency as some high level developer, they're probably not going to take your application if you don't have a degree, or there's a lot of places that wouldn't, so that is a whole lot different than if you just want to open up shop and do all of this yourself. It makes a pretty big difference on what path to take.
Yeah, and considering that both you and I are kind of in that same spot, like I took my general education stuff and got that out of the way. You did an associate's. What I would like to know, because there was such a higher percentage of people that do have like actual related schooling, as well as just people that had gone to college. I want to hear from those people in the comments, like what are we missing? Like, what are we not bringing up? Because I mean, we don't know what we don't know, right? So,
Sure.
I mean, if there is like other arguments for or against, we definitely want to know that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll drop a link inside these show notes here to the poll I did inside the group this morning, because I think before we started this, the poll had been out like 2 hours and there was already over 100 comments on it. So there's tons of conversation going in there already. So you can read through a lot of people's thoughts on that, and then make sure to drop your own as well.
Yeah.
All right. So before we wrap it up, anything else you want to add to this?
No, it's just good to be back.
Yes, absolutely. A short one today, but shorter is probably better. Get us back in the groove.
Yes. Yep.
All right. Well, I think that will just about do us for today. And I want to thank everybody for joining us. And like Matt said, we'd love to know your thoughts on these topics. So make sure you join the Admin Bar community if you're not already. Find that link to this thread, and then you can add your notes in there. All the relevant links to this will be inside the show notes, which you can find at theadminbar.com/podcast. And while you're there, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes. And we will catch you all inside the group. Bye-bye.